Afternoon, guys. Tim Bailey here, Xpert Archery Pro Staff, here with Jeremy Duggar. We're going to start doing some YouTube videos, get you guys rolling, and teach you guys how to do some of these advanced tuning things to your bow to make your bow shoot better.
Starting today. So what we did today is we did an indoor arrow setup, arrow build, from start to finish. All the little things that make a big difference when you're shooting for accuracy indoor. Got the finished product here, so stay tuned, check out this video. Alright everybody, I got my new indoor arrows in. Going to be shooting gold tip triple X's. Today I'm going to show you how I personally set up my indoor arrows, and we're going to go in depth. We're going to do everything that you possibly can do to an indoor arrow to ensure that it's you and not the arrow. And so what we got here is, and let me just preface this by saying I've shot a lot of clean scores indoors, a lot of 300 Vegases, a lot of clean FAA rounds, 60Xers, and didn't do what I'm fixing to do to my arrows. However, it's those rounds that you sometimes miss, some shots you feel like maybe you shouldn't have missed. Things happen to you that maybe you don't feel like were right. We're going to try to eliminate that, or all those things, the possibility of them happening, by doing everything we can to these arrows to make them perfect. So what we got is gold tip triple X's in the Pro Series, plus or minus 1,000 straight. That's a good start, a good straight arrow. Then we have all the components to go with it. So we got your pin adapters, we got the glue-in points. We're going to start with the 150 grains. We have 50 grain modules. As we get to tuning, if we need those, we may or may not use those. We have Gold Tip's brand new, new and improved pin knock. Really cool pin knock. They used to have two different pin knocks. They had a standard pin knock and they had an HD pin knock. The standard pin knocks is what I've used a lot. They're okay. I have to change them out pretty frequently because of the durability of them. If you shoot a lot, you're going to weaken the ears. You start to see the groups widen up. You have to replace them. So to fix that, they came out with an HD knock, and I wasn't really ever a big fan of how it fit on the string at full draw. So I think Gold Tip was pretty aware of it too, so they came out with a hybrid knock that's got the durability of the HD, but it's got the fit of the standard pin. So we're going to be using those. Those are brand new this year for 2017. I'm a feather guy. I like to shoot feathers, and so we've got I got a silver podium with yellow and black motif going on. So we've got left and right wing feathers. Part of what we're going to do today is we're going to clock the arrows, and we'll get into that a little bit later. That will dictate to me whether I need to be using a left or a right wing feather. So let's get to it. Okay everybody, so step one, we've got all of our components, and we're going to start by flexing these arrows using the last chance easy press, and we're going to find the stiff side and weak side of the arrow. We're going to mark, doesn't matter which side you mark. I think what I'm going to do today is I'm going to mark the weak side, and if I decide to fletch my cock vein on the stiff side, I'll just go on the opposite side of the arrow. If I decide to fletch them on the weak side, I'll just fletch them on the weak side. The key here is that as the arrow leaves the bow, the arrow, all 12 arrows are flexing and behaving the exact same way every time. That gives you the best chance for all 12 of those arrows to impact the same point. So that's the idea of this. People in the past have floated them in a bathtub to find the stiff and weak side and marked them. That's a pretty extensive endeavor, but I know people probably that still even do that. Some manufacturers even are starting to mark that for you. Gold Tip does not, so we're just going to find that by ourselves. So what we're going to do is unbundle these arrows. And if you want us at Xpert Archery to do this for you, you're welcome to come down. We can figure out a fee for you. We can do it for you and mark them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of points. We're going to insert those points into each end of the shaft. Just like that. Then all you have to do is just put the point against the arm of the easy press. Start to slowly spin it in until the other point makes contact with the other arm. And then as you start to spin it, the shaft is going to flex in one direction or the other. So right now, as you can see, this shaft is flexing almost straight downward. If I was to spin this arrow, it's going to start to flex diagonally down and to the left. A little more, it'll flex straight out almost to the right. And as I spin it, changes the way it flexes it. So what I'm doing is finding the stiff side of the shaft or the weak side, based on putting pressure on it. So as we go the other direction, you can see it start to flex out away from me. So here pretty quick, as you just do it little by little, you can see the rotation or the flex, the direction of the bend. So I'm going to come back to where that shaft is flexing straight down. Which is going to be about right there. So you want to get as straight down of a flex as you can get. Straight down moving towards the floor. We're going to mark this side. This would be the stiff side. Right on top of the shaft. So this would be the stiff side of the arrow. This bottom would be the weak side. So you should be able to take that, remove that arrow, spin it however you want to spin it, put it back in the press. Roll that to the mark that you made. And that shaft should flex straight at the floor just like that. So we've now found the stiff side of the arrow. So this one's done. Moving on to the next one. Just a little tip too, you might have a pair of pliers handy to get those tips out of the shaft. Otherwise you'll be really frustrated running around looking for pliers for 20 minutes and slowing down your process. Been there, done that. Okay, so there's number one. Let's take number two. And we're going to go through all 12 of these arrows with the same technique here to find the stiff side of the arrow. I think I might have said earlier we might mark whatever side, but I think it's going to be very easy to mark the stiff side because the weak side will be flexing down towards the floor. So obviously easier to mark it on the top and not get on your knees and try to look under there, right? So so here we go on number two. Flexing out. Should say flexing in towards the press there. A little more in, straight in. Now back out to the left, down and left, getting back down to the stiff side. All I'm doing is just rotating it just really slow and just barely putting any pressure on the wheel of the press until it flexes the arrow. I suppose you could be as picky as you wanted to be, because you can look down the shaft and see it barely flexing. You have generally already determined the stiffer side of the arrow, right? So you can spend as much time on this as you want getting it to perfection. I would say that is probably just dead on perfect. So we're going to mark that side as the stiff. Two down, 10 to go. Okay guys, I'm wrapping up the spine testing here. And again, we're doing this so that we leave nothing to chance on the line. It's all up to you how hardcore you go with your hobby. But it's fun to do this, and if we think that down the road it might get us a few extra X's and points, that's why we do it. So we're going to finish up here. This is the 12th one. And I'm going to get a little more aggressive on the wheel this time so you can see it a little better. So if we give it a really good push, really fast spin, you can see it really flex. If I spin that arrow, really flex into the right. You can see that. Spin it the other way, really flex into the left. Spin it to the top, really flex into the top. So you can really find that side. So we're just going to spin it, give it a quick turn on the handle, and you're going to see that finally you got it to where the stiff side is pushing the weak side down towards the bottom. So all done. On to the next. Okay, so we're all done checking the spine of our arrows. That way when we shoot these arrows, we'll have our nock oriented to where the stiff side will be up, and the arrows will behave the same. Every arrow will behave the same coming out of the bow. So what we're going to do now is we are going to get ready to install our pin adapters and our pin nocks. Something cool about Gold Tip, I'm sure that all of you have seen videos in the past, probably with Tim Gillingham, teaching you how to cut off both ends of the arrows. And that's due to the fact that for a long time, Gold Tip, when they checked straightness tolerance, and this is probably true with other manufacturers as well, only checked it in the center. This year, after talking to my guy Austin May, he informed me that they are now checking straightness tolerance at Gold Tip in the center and on both ends. So when you have a batch of arrows or a bundle of arrows you buy from Gold Tip that says they're 1,000 straight, they're 1,000 straight here, here, and here. So that kind of eliminates the need to cut off the ends of your shafts anymore. However, since I'm a creature of habit and I always do it, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit just because I'm so used to doing that. You don't have to do that anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut off just a little bit of the back end of the shaft. We're going to use the good old G5 ASD arrow squaring device. Really like that. We're going to get that shaft nice and square, and then we're going to install our pin adapter. I'm a flexible hot melt guy. I've been shooting since 1989. We used to use Ferrotite for our inserts, to glue broadheads on and various things. That stuff was very brittle. It takes impact, takes impact, takes impact. It's brittle, it breaks. You lose your points, lose your broadheads. We used to lose all kinds of stuff. Nowadays, your hot melt is flexible. So make sure that if you use the hot melt, you use a good flexible hot melt. I'm a flexible hot melt guy because I like to play with recutting arrows. You know, we may see that later on in our bare shaft tuning. We're going to have to heat the point up. Never put heat on the direct carbon. You heat the point up, pull the point out, recut, put it back in. Obviously, you cannot perform tuning techniques with any glue that is permanent. So we like to use flexible hot melt. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk over to the saw, going to trim off a little bit of the back end, going to square it up, and install all of our pin adapters. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set our cutoff saw to cut off roughly an inch of the shaft. They're 32 inches long. I'm only a 27.5 draw archer, so we got a lot to play with here. But I'm just going to cut off an inch of the back there, roughly. So we're just going to set our saw. And you don't even really need to measure it. Just, I'm going to call it good about right there. And we're going to trim the back off each one of these arrows here. So if you can't laugh at yourself, you can't laugh at yourself, but you got to laugh at yourself. You probably noticed that one of those, I cut it off the front. It's okay, it's 32 inches long. We're going to turn the saw back on, cut it off the back, still have plenty to work with on the front. My cameraman's laughing at me right now. Make sure Make sure your labels are all facing the same direction or you're going to have all this crazy stuff going on. Luckily, I only did one. And you have to readjust your saw. Oh yeah. About right. There. Now we have a lucky arrow. We have now laughed pretty good and recovered from our debacle over there. I hit the cutoff saw. We're going to go ahead and use the really cool G5 arrow squaring device. Love this little dude. We've got the carbon cutting insert installed in it since we're doing carbon. So all we're going to do is we're just going to slide it into the groove. Use your index finger. I do it on my left hand just to hold pressure down on the shaft. Use your right hand to spin the arrow and add pressure against the cutting surface. And what it does is that just beautifully squares the back end of your arrow. So not only are they going to shoot really accurate, but they're going to be nice and square, and you're going to have a good looking arrow. Pretty fast process, won't take very long. If you have a good cutoff saw and you got a steady hand at the cutoff saw, then you can cut them pretty straight to begin with. But like I said, I love my hobby. I like to do everything I can to give myself the best chance to shoot a lot of X's. Okay, we got two more left here, so we're going to go ahead and finish up squaring the back ends before we install our pin adapters. It's the last one here. Okay, and as you can see, you're not removing very much carbon, but you can see that there's a little bit of trim and square that happened on the back end of those shafts. So again, it makes them look nice and square on the back. Make sure that the push is straight on the arrow from the string, and it gives you every chance to be successful. Okay, so we have the back end cut, squared. Always make sure that you clean the inside of the shafts before you glue any component in there, because trust me, if you don't, you're going to have issues. So what we're going to do is, we like to use Q-tips at Xpert Archery. It makes it nice and simple. We have a alcohol dispenser, denatured alcohol. I've had this dispenser for I don't know how long time. I'm sure you can find them somewhere. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dab some alcohol on the end of the Q-tip. We're going to swab that out real good. So you can see all that carbon, fine carbon dust there. That would definitely prohibit good adhesion. So we want to clean all that out. Okay, so now that we got all of the shafts cleaned, we're going to install the pin adapters. Just going to open those up. Okay, so we're going to be using our flexible hot melt. You can see that that's a good flexible hot melt. So it's going to make a really good, it'll create a really good glue bond. But if you ever want to get those pin adapters out, if somebody hits the back of your arrow on a 3D course, or you're group shooting for any reason, I won't be doing this on indoor arrows, but we use the pin adapters on other arrows. If you have those things epoxied in, you're out of luck. If you have them hot melted in, you can grab the tip of the shaft, put the heat on the pin adapter, let it transfer the heat till it's just warm to the touch, and pop that thing right out of there. So I'm going to use a fancy little tool. One of my customers from a long time ago, Dale Hatley, built me. He took a pair of pliers or cutters and kind of ground out the middle into a round shape. Been using those for a long time. Those will grab that pin adapter nice and solid. So let's turn on our flame. I always like to keep a paper towel handy because as soon as I get this pin adapter installed in the shaft, I'm going to clean the excess glue off with a paper towel. So what I like to do is let's heat that pin adapter up. Doesn't have to be too hot. And you don't need a whole lot of glue either. Just a decent little coating of glue. A little extra heat. Get it started. I usually just press against the side of the table. Take your paper towel. Rub that excess glue off. And there's a pin adapter installed perfectly. Arrow shaft is square, no gaps. Looks nice. And I don't like to get these components too hot. I mean, it doesn't take very much to melt that glue. If you're a tough guy, you can rub that hot glue off with your fingers if you want to. Okay, so now we've got our pin adapters installed. A little bit of shaft cut off the back. Ready to go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut just a little bit off the front, and we're going to get what I would call just a raw start length, because what's going to happen ultimately is we're going to cut this arrow back into tune. So as we cut it down, it becomes stiffer and it changes how it reacts or how it kicks or doesn't kick out of the bow. So we're going to start with the raw length and go to tuning. So we're going to walk back to the cutoff saw, cut off just a little bit off the front, install our points. And the next clip we'll be back on the range and we'll be shooting these arrows starting to tune. Okay, so I've got the arrow cut to a raw length that's going to be too long. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install the points, and just remember you want to make sure the shaft is clean. So again, using a Q-tip, we'll clean out the front of the shaft. We're going to glue our tip in, and we'll be ready to go back and start the tuning process on the range. Okay, so we're back on the range now. What we're going to do is we're going to install our pin nocks, and we're going to use the line that we created on the stiff side of the arrow. We're going to place the pin nock on the pin adapter and rotate it to where that's facing up, because the next step in this arrow setup process is going to be we're going to clock our arrows. So what that means is we're going to shoot them with no fletchings from 3 feet, 5 feet, 7 feet, and we're going to check which direction these arrows want to naturally rotate with no fletchings. Then what we're going to do, if it clocks to the left, we're going to fletch with the left helical so we can facilitate that spin. We can get it to spin quicker, faster RPMs, faster stabilization. If it goes to the right, we're going to fletch them with the right helical. So that's what we're fixing to do. So we're just going to install the pin, nock, and we have a line marked, and that's the stiff side of the arrow. So we're just going to make sure that that line starts on the top of the shaft, because this shaft is going to naturally want to spin one way or the other without fletchings on it. And we're going to clock that spin and see which way that arrow wants to spin, utilizing that mark. Okay, so we're now to the clocking phase of our arrow setup. So what we're going to do, we have our pin nocks installed. We have the Sharpie mark marking the stiff side of the shaft. We're going to place that up, knock our arrow on. So we're going to start roughly at 3 feet. We're going to shoot this bare shaft, and we're going to see if there's any natural rotation, and if so, which direction it goes. So as we can see at 3 feet, the shaft is already beginning to naturally want to rotate to the left. Sharpie mark is here. It's also evident in the knock. When it left the bow, it was in this position, and at 3 feet, it's already started to begin to rotate to the left. So let's try another. Really like the new snap, the new fit of those new gold tip pin knocks. Really awesome. Exactly the same rotation. Not only is it left again, but at the same distance as it is exactly rotated the exact amount as the other shaft did. So we got a left spin. Which means most likely we're going to fletch these, not actually most likely, we are going to fletch them left helical. I know that there are some guys out there as well that use blade rests, and they fletch a lot of times left helical just for blade clearance as the arrow leaves the bow. The way that the left helical wraps the shaft, you have better clearance on your blade. I shoot a drop away arrow rest, so I just want to help facilitate that spin, get it stabilized quicker, so that's why we're doing this. Again, you don't have to go through all these steps. Some of them might seem a little hardcore to some people. I have shot a lot of really good scores without doing these steps, but I personally like to do these steps these days just to leave nothing to chance. Okay, that was our 12th arrow. At 7 feet, we ran 3 feet, 5 feet, 7 feet. We can see that all of our shafts are indeed going to naturally want to spin to the left. And as we move back, there's more rotation on them. So at 3 feet, the arrow looked about like this. And at 7 feet, you just saw it. So it's continuing a left spin with no fletchings on it, so we're going to fletch our arrows left helical. Okay guys and gals, we're going to go ahead and fletch an arrow now for this bow build. Going to fletch them with left wing feathers because we clocked the arrow naturally wanting to spin left without any feather or vein on it. So we're going to facilitate that spin, get some RPMs going there, and help it to rotate that direction. Using my hybrid jig today, we had to call one of our other pro staff buddies, Troy Grogan, to get a clamp. So I'm using a BPE jig and a Bitzenberger clamp. Sorry BPE, sorry Bitzenberger. I'm supporting you both. Kind of weird, but it works really good. So what we're going to do, I went ahead and marked the bushing. I had marked the stiff side of the arrow when we did our test for spine, stiff side, weak side. And so now I'm going to clean this shaft. And I don't want to clean that mark off and forget where I was at. So I went ahead and transferred the mark to the bushing. So what we're going to do first is we're going to clean the shaft good. A lot of your carbon shafts, really dirty. So if you skip this step, you're probably not going to have good fletching adhesion. So always make sure you clean that really good. I don't know if Tim will be able to show that or not, but it's pretty dirty. So just make sure you get all that extra carbon dust and everything off of that. Okay, we're going to load this up on our jig. I personally, when I do feathers, and this is going to be a very personal thing, might have some disagreeals out there, and probably definitely some agreeals, but I like to use fletching tape. It makes for a much cleaner job. I find that they you don't have any feathers ever falling off. These are strictly indoor arrows. No weather, no rain, no nothing. So we use the fletching tape from Bonnie. It's nice and clean, works like a champ. So we're just going to position our feather fletching in the clamp. Make sure you have it on the same back end location every time, so you don't have some of your fletchings farther from the knock than others. I'm just going to take this tape roll. You find the end of it here. once you do this a few times, you get pretty handy at it. I grab the clamp with my thumb and my middle finger of my left hand, so I can use my index finger to trap that tape down. So what I do is I start the tape, trap it down there, hold it down, and as I roll it out, keep it tight and pressure it in position with the index finger of my right hand. Everything good there. I got my scissors. Trim that off. Okay, make sure your feather or vein didn't move. Then I use a scissor tip point to peel up the double sticky side. Let the magnet grab, hit the back end, push against the magnet, slowly push down onto the shaft. And that's just how fast fletching tape works. When I pull this arrow completely off, I'll rub my thumb all the way down that and make sure we get a good adhesion. Number 2. Talk less here now, just roll. Bonning makes a handy dandy little tape dispenser they sell, pretty cool. I've done it so many years with my hands, I'm probably just as quick with my hands. So. One more. Something I can talk about here real quick while I'm doing this. In this arrow build, you can see that I'm actually using a different color cock vein. A lot of times I use all 3 the same color. And the reason I do that is because in the past I've skipped the step of finding the stiff side of the arrow. And so what happens is you get some arrows that don't quite group right. If you have all 3 of the same color fletchings, then what you can do is I've got a shooting machine here, and we plug them into the shooting machine if you're having issues with grouping, and you can shoot arrows that are not grouping, and you can rotate the nock to the next fletching, thereby changing where the stiff side and the weak side of the shaft is, and that will sometimes pull the arrow into the group. So in other words, sometimes I've used all 3 colors the same and used the shooting machine to kind of shoot my spine in. Today we actually took care of that, nipped that in the bud, and did that right off the bat. So I don't feel like I need to fletch them all 3 the same color. So I'm going to kind of match my bow, like make it look cool with the odd color cock vein. Cool thing about archery, you can do whatever you want to do. You can do it either way. Personalize it to you, have a good time with it, including the cosmetics of your equipment. Okay, all 3 on, so I'm going to remove it from the jig, take my thumb, just going to run that right down that feather, make sure we have good adhesion. Same thing here, same thing on the cock vein. Okay, and boom, we have our mark, stiff side, cock vein on the stiff side on all of the arrows. We didn't want to take a whole lot of time showing you fletching all of these arrows. We just wanted to show you kind of how one is done. So that's how it's done, ready to shoot. Okay, so now what we've done is we've fletched one of our shafts. We've got the cock vein on the stiff side, kind of ready to rock and roll here. So what I'm going to do now is, if you can remember, we just left these longer than they're going to be to clock them. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start them at 30 1/4, which for me has worked in the past. We've got a fletched shaft, we got a bare shaft. We're going to get them to 30 1/4, then we're going to go back and perform a bare shaft test. And so what we're going to do is we're going to shoot our fletched arrow at the target. We're going to shoot the bare shaft right behind it, and we want the impact to be pretty close to the same. I think a lot of y'all out there know that it doesn't have to be exactly the same to be supremely accurate, but for me it's a good starting point. And once we're acceptably close, and then we're just going to go to shooting, and we're going to shoot it in and like it. So Here we go. We're going to pull these points, cut them down to 30 1/4, and get going on the bare shaft testing. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to light up our torch here. We use the flexible hot melt to put the points in, so I'm going to kind of show you how to do this so you don't damage the shaft. So again, I'm going to use my Del Hatley made pliers that are kind of rounded conically, so they'll grab the tip. What I like to do is I like to just grab the carbon and cover that with my fingers and start to just heat the very tip of the point. And you'll be able to feel the heat conducting down in to the point where it's under the shaft there. You can feel that with your fingers. You don't want to get it too hot. It'll come out pretty easy. A little more than that. It's a little easier with a bullet nose point versus one of these pro point type points. There it comes. And as you can see, I can grab right onto that, and there's no heat on the carbon. I can hold that as long as I want to hold it. Not hard. Okay. So that way you didn't put any, hardly any heat on the carbon, but you're able to remove your point and cut off length to tune your bow that way, tune your shafts. Okay, so I just got done cutting the bare shaft and the fletch shaft to 30 1/4 inches, which is just traditionally a length that works pretty well for me. So we're going to go back and we're going to shoot the fletch shaft and the bare shaft and see if we need to make any adjustments to our bow to like those arrows a little more. So we'll see you on the range. Okay, so here we are on the range. What we're going to do is we're going to shoot the fletched arrow first, and then right behind that the bare shaft, and we'll see how it reacts with no fletchings on it. And if we need to, we'll make some adjustments. So here goes the fletched arrow. Okay, so right behind that, we're going to run the bare shaft. Got it cut at 30 1/4, same as the fletched. Okay, so what we're going to do is walk down and take a look, and if we need to make some adjustments, we'll do that. Okay, so what we can see is I knew that I had my bow sighted in from previous arrows. Had a pretty good confidence that the fletched arrow was going to hit the middle, which it did. But you can see with this new arrow build, fletched is in the middle, bare shaft is kicking downward and just a little bit to the left. And so what we're going to do is we're going to check our knocking point height on our bow. I really kind of like this because we're not going to need any sort of macro adjustment. I think we're just going to do some fine tuning to the bow build, and it should be good. So we're going to lower our knocking point just a little bit, and we might bump our rest out just a tiny bit. And we're going to see if we can get these to impact a little closer together. Okay, so we've made adjustments a little bit to the bow build, the bow tune. We're just in the final stages now of our arrow build. So what we did is we noticed that the knocking point was a little bit high, so we lowered the knocking point, made a small adjustment to the center shot because it seemed like the arrow was coming out kicking a little bit right. We also re-bushed the bottom cam just a little bit, took out some bottom wheel lead. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and shoot the fletched arrow on the bare shaft and see if we can finish this up. Go ahead and run the bare shaft behind it. Something to keep in mind is you want to shoot as good as you can here. No trigger punching, no bad shots. Okay, let's go take a look. Okay, so these are the last 2 arrows I shot. If you remember when we started, the bare shaft was kicking pretty badly. Was way down here somewhere. So we made some adjustments to really minimize the difference between our fletched and our bare shaft. Some people might get a little more hardcore and try to get it perfect. I find that not always is that the correct spot to make sure your bow is the most forgiving. So on this arrow build, we don't want to get too in depth on a bow tune-up, but on this arrow build, I'm very satisfied with these new arrows. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start shooting them. I may make some small adjustments to my bow tune as I go along, but pretty satisfied. So that's how to build up your indoor arrows. I like the triple X's. I feel like I'm ready to rock out some X's. Let's do it. Okay, so one last thing, kind of getting down to the end of this arrow build. This matters to some people, some not, but I'm going to show you something cool about these arrows. So I'm going to call out the weights here as we go across this. .468, .468.8, .468, .468.3, .467.5, .468.4, .469, .469, .469, .467.2. So basically, our heaviest arrow was .469, our lightest arrow was .467.2. Gold tip out of the box before you build your arrows promises a plus or minus 2 grain tolerance. I'd say that they're spot on, because what we just did is we just added a bunch of glue to a pin adapter, a bunch of glue to a point. Of course, we try to keep those as equal as possible when we do an arrow build. But how cool is that? After completely built, the arrows are under 2 grains top to bottom. And most people probably don't care a whole lot about that in indoor. But again, we want to give everything the best chance to go on the X if we happen to mess up a shot. So I'd say the arrows are ready to go.